So today we're going to be talking about user interface, user experience design. Up here I have Nick, Cole, and Trevor. I was wondering if each of you could just start and tell us a little bit about what you do. And yeah.
Yeah, hey everybody. First of all, welcome and thanks for joining us. It's super great to see everybody here. I think this is going to be an exciting day. I'm Nick Sainato. I'm co-founder of Gamma.io. We're a creator tools, creator launchpad, and marketplace for ordinal inscriptions and even NFTs on L2. And we're really just trying to make the creator experience as seamless and accessible as possible for creators on Bitcoin.
Thanks, Nick. My name's Cole Jorissen. I'm the co-founder of Oil Dynamics, which is a Bitcoin infrastructure company designed to lower the barrier of entry for developers to create on Ordinals and Bitcoin Layer 1 native. And the first client that we're building on that is a wallet. So really everything I say about UI and UX in regards to the wallet that no one has seen yet, we'll have that come out soon, but look forward to you guys listening along.
Hi, I'm Trevor Owens. I'm the managing partner of the Bitcoin Frontier Fund, the CEO of Ninja Alerts, and co-host of the Ordinal Show.
Awesome. Thank you again, Nick, for all of your hard work on this event today. It's awesome to be here. So I guess just to kick it off, obviously, we are more and more tied to the digital space. Usability, accessibility, it becomes more and more important. A good user interface and user experience is a large part of what makes a product successful. The Ordinals and Bitcoin space is particular and unique. And so I was just wondering if any of you could speak on some of the specific technical challenges and constraints that you encounter in creating a solid user experience within the Ordinals or Bitcoin ecosystem.
Yeah, sure. I'll hop in here first. So I think something would be helpful for sort of everyone in the room is to align on these terms. People hear UI, UX, is this one thing? Is this user experience, is user interface? How are they different? What are they? So I think I can sort of give a little bit of information about that. So UI is user interface, UX is user experience. While they are very deeply interconnected, they are very distinct ideas. So the user experience is one type of abstraction. This is an abstraction that is built on top of the intent, like how we're trying to drive behaviors, what the user outcome is. Whereas the user interface is how we leverage visual hierarchies to apply that to something that a customer can interact with. So you can talk about UI and UX as siloed things, but in many cases, the UX suggests many things about the UI, and the desired UI can also drive things about the UX.
I mean, perfect explanation. Couldn't have said it better myself. I think that in a space that is as technical as basically the Bitcoin space, everything that is core to the protocol, like something as core as a UTXO, to Casey's last example on NFT, being an acronym, and then once you break it down, it still makes no sense to somebody. I think UTXO is another example of that. Like, what does that mean? And even if I break it out, it still probably has no meaning to the average person. So yet that is core to not only the Ordinals protocol, but it's core to the payments that you're sending to purchase things, and so on and so forth. And so I think some of those things are tricky because you need the correct language to really communicate the best way for a user to complete a given task. And like I said, it might be something as simple as sending a payment. And so the idea of, hey, I'm trying to, create 30 inscriptions in a row, but I only have one UTXO in my wallet. And so now I don't realize that's going to impact downstream, into the product experience. And the product needs to, reflect that in a way that makes sense to the user. So I think, really going back to like first principles, thinking about what those, core touch points are, those like core intro points where people are sort of, interfacing often from the wallet. So I think it's great that we have, a wallet here up with us, making sure that tie-in is really smooth and makes sense to the user is, I think, one of the major things to really get right.
Yeah, I mean, I think UX is a big topic, right? And I think people have various understandings of it. People usually think of UX as design or if something like looks good. But I tend to think of it more as like just making a product easy to use. But for most builders, like UX is definitely like not important at all in the early stages. What's actually the most important is product market fit, right? So one of my mentors, Eric Ries, author of the Lean Startup, used to say that if you make a really great UX on something that nobody wants, they're just going to realize that they don't want it faster, right? And so I think for most builders in the space, you really got to focus on having a differentiated value proposition and finding something that is valuable for users. Like think about the early UX of Ordinals. People were in Discord servers trading on spreadsheets and doing OTC trades with people that they've never met, right? And that's because it was so valuable. That product market fit was so strong. But once you have found that product market fit, that's when it really gets important to make a good UX. And I think that the overall UX of the Web3 space is kind of like the 1999 AOL era. Like we're at the phase where it's like, you have a dial-up modem. It's like dee 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 dee. You've got mail. Like we're at that stage of the evolution. And one of the challenges is that there are no sort of best practices for this space. Like if you're building a social app, you can look at hundreds of websites. There's standards. There's research reports. And so the underpinning of good UX, I think, especially considering the stage we're at, is actually really good user research. And so there needs to be a lot of experimentation to figure out what is the right model or the right sort of mental model for the users to understand what they're actually doing on the blockchain. And then there needs to be like millions and millions of dollars spent on A/B testing and optimization. And so like if you look at a company like Stripe, for example, like they spent tens of millions of dollars with and they've written about this with like dedicated full-time employees who are just documenting friction points in their sign-up flow. And so they will spend tens of thousands of hours, millions of dollars, so they can get that extra 1% of users converted. And it takes Series A funding. It takes a lot of time and effort to go from, hey, we have this initial product market fit. We have the early adopters. We're growing really fast. We have millions of users, but then to get to 10 million, 100 million, et cetera, this is where it gets really, really expensive. And like all of the work comes into these sort of like mundane and tedious like documentation of friction and user research to get that extra like 1% conversion per month. And so when it comes to where we're at the ordinal space right now, I think we're still figuring out what are the mental models for like what the user is actually doing, right? Like how do you get a user to really easily understand what the mempool is? How do you get the user to really understand what's happening when they're waiting for 10 minutes and their transaction isn't confirmed? This is all unexplored territory that I think if a startup has like really good user research and experiments with a lot of different paradigms, they'll be able to measure that conversion rate. And one of the biggest unlocks in the last cycle was the UX of MetaMask. Like they came up with a really good paradigm for this web wallet. And it was just like the first time you use it, it's like you see your Ethereum balance, you see the dollar sign. You literally feel like you're playing like a game. You know what I mean? When you're trading NFTs on OpenSea, you're trying to flip and get that number to go up, right? And so MetaMask, of course, has a long way to go. We know seed phrases are like really difficult to understand, but there's no clear answers of how we get from like the MetaMask level to the next level. And I think until MetaMask came out, there was no proven way that we were even going to get to that level. And so that's kind of like my general take on like where we're at in the stage in UX and what I think is important.
Thank you so much, Trevor. Honestly, in that answer, you just touched on like literally every single question that I have prepared for the rest of the panel. So yeah.
Sorry, I do that sometimes.
No, it's okay. Go off, King. So would either of you like to speak on maybe some of your experiences in bringing new users and onboarding new users and how UX UI has impacted your experience in that area?
Sure. So I think, when we're trying to onboard people to the ordinal space, there are a couple different perspectives as to where that audience is going to come from. So, there's the maximalist who knows how to use the node. They're running Sparrow. They're in the command line. They're doing things like this. And, that the UX for Sparrow is inextricably linked to the intent of what that user is trying to do. Like, I wouldn't say that Sparrow has a bad UI or a bad UX for what it's trying to do. It's just for that customer segment. So in terms of like, how do we onboard people? I think wire transfer UX is absolutely horrendous. I have to add a recipient. I have to have all these codes. And it's actually way simpler to have one address that I know on Ethereum or on MetaMask and just send it to that. And so like, I think when there's such a high financial incentive to participate in these new products and ecosystems, people will jump through hoops. People will mint things directly from Etherscan. As Trevor was speaking to, they're in like this Discord thing. And so for onboarding, what's really tricky now is we are at the tip of the spear and we have to decide which abstractions are scalable for the ecosystem and which ones are not. For example, right now, everyone coming from different ecosystems is coming to Bitcoin and it's like, what? There's Taproot and there's SegWit. I've got these two addresses. Every single place on the planet says, do not send Bitcoin to Taproot address, but you can, and it works fine. And so right now we're in a wallet paradigm where every single wallet has like 6 different receiving addresses. There's fax addresses, there's all these different addresses, and it represents this fractured focus of how we understand the industry. And even shifting from a Taproot and SegWit to just a Taproot where there's a single derivation path is really something that's going to be persuaded by the centralized exchanges. Once they support sending to Taproot, then we can have this whole new UX unlock where now there's only one address in Taproot Bitcoin. But like understanding how we cross that chasm from where we are now, making 3 to 5% change to existing UX patterns that all these individuals already understand, say swapping or seed phrases. At this point, I wouldn't recommend we abstract away seed phrases. The second someone interacts with a product that doesn't expose to them their seed phrase, they're not going to know that it's non-custodial. And so like in terms of onboarding, it's really navigating and understanding how do we chase out the trajectory of this abstraction? Is this going to be scalable? And maybe we have to put our foot down and, go get rid of the iPhone. What is it? When they got rid of the headphone jack, at some point you just have to do that and people will hate it and they'll say, oh, it's bad UX, but you can make it sexy with a good UI and you can sell it in terms of product strategy. And the UX is really going to be aligned to how is your company positioned? It is completely dependent on that.
Yeah, no, I always say this is a little bit of a tangent, but when Coinbase send to Taproot addresses, I don't understand why it's 2023 and actually almost 2024 and you can still not send to a Taproot address. But no, it's back to kind of these like early touch points and learning from users and kind of these experiences. I think one of the things that's been both exciting but overwhelming, and it has its pros and cons, is just how quickly we've gotten from 0 to 1 here in the the protocol and the whole industry. We sort of started in a period of it was really a couple of weeks. Gamma, for example, we were doing our first test inscriptions, kind of figuring out how things were working around inscription 600 or so, and within like a week and a half, we had launched our inscription tool and we were already at 10,000, and then after that it was quickly at 100,000, and like this is overwhelming, and you don't necessarily have the time to have it be completely flawless, like right from the start, and making sure that experience is completely top notch. And to your point, I think that led to a lot of applications saying only ever send inscriptions to a Taproot address, as an example, in the reverse, which is not really the case. It's just the easiest way to communicate, hey, don't use a wallet where you're going to lose it, is kind of like the shortcut to get there. But then you sort of have this period where you say, okay, now we have this, level 1 infrastructure that's set up. It's like total MVP, getting the job done, but nothing more. It's maybe an awful user experience otherwise. Now you can kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, what did we get wrong? How can we explain this better? And I think it's really talking to your users, and you have this crazy influx of people using it. Probably a lot of them are going to have issues. And so having really great support where you're listening to this feedback, funneling that back to your product team, funneling that back to your designers, your marketing people, everyone, your engineers, making sure that everyone is really, keeping abreast of what people are saying and what people are having trouble with, and not being afraid to do that, that moment where you yank the cord or however you want to describe it and say, hey, we're going to switch, but we feel really convicted that like this is now the new paradigm and we're comfortable moving forward with this.
Awesome. Thank you. That's actually a great segue into another question that I'm curious about that touches more on intuitive design. Do either of you have a particular outlook on finding the sweet spot in creating a digital tool that is kind of the sweet spot between complexity and simplicity so as to optimize a digital output, like the productivity of the tool, without overwhelming the user. Because sometimes when you have too many options, there's too much going on in the tool, it can actually take away from the user experience, but you also want to provide a product that optimizes the result.
Yeah, sure. I think this would piggyback on Trevor's stress on product market fit. If I'm using Coinbase Pro tools, I expect to see the depth chart. I expect to see all these additional information, and so it's really like, what customer are you going for? And so right now, it's understanding who is the customer that's really participating in this. And this type of customer is actually attracted to a lot of the complexity. A lot of the people who are in crypto are here because I'm here, at least speaking for myself, because I'm attracted to complexity. I want the ambiguity. I want the uncertainty. And so what a lot of the people in crypto might enjoy is more information than what you think the standard customer would want. And so I think the holy grail is creating an experience that is sufficiently abstracted that a mainstream customer can glean what's going on and at least achieve their actions, but that more sophisticated users can drill into, say, what's the tranche composition of this PSBT? How are these orders composed? What are the inputs and outputs? But I think there's still a huge step up that needs to be made in terms of like parsing and communicating those signatures and things like that to users. So I think some of those things should be like standardized. We should always see things described in the price in Bitcoin, in dollars, in sats. Like those things, like you have to keep. But I think as we get more closer and closer to the mainstream, we're going to start to see even more abstractions, and abstractions that are probably ill-advised. Like we've seen these DeFi products that are abstracting away yield. There's Alice and Donut, and you're like, oh, just cool, just put your money in, you're going to get 8%, and people don't actually understand what's going on behind it. And so like those are the tools that they go way too ahead, they get far too abstracted, and they say we're going for mainstream right now, but then mainstream bites you because it doesn't work, and there wasn't proper user education or understanding of what someone really should know about the product.
Yeah, I think 100% agree here. I think it really comes down to customer segmentation. At Ninja Alerts, for example, with traders and degens, they actually like want to be overwhelmed. Like when they love the products where it's like a fire hose of stuff just like coming at you. That's how they feel they're getting the most value, right? Is that like they have all the information just coming at you, whereas another user, they're not gonna want that at all. And so you have to pick your strategy from a business perspective, which customer you're going to target, and you need to know then like looking at the other products, like we just said, like if you look at Blur, for example, like this is like a very tiny UI, and there's like so much going on the screen, and that kind of gives people a feeling that they have more power over what they're doing. But maybe if you're working with artists, let's say, who aren't very tech savvy, they're going to want, something very simple, like one click, drag and drop your file, and then upload it. And so when it comes to like, once you pick the customer segment, the thing you want to figure out to really nail is what's called the first time user experience. And so the first time user experience is that like that sign up flow, and you want to reduce the time from the initial sign up to what's called the aha moment. And so the aha moment in product development is when that user first feels like they got value. And a lot of times there's like multiple aha moments along the pathway. And so for Ninja Alerts, for example, it would be like, I first follow someone's wallet, or I connect my wallet to see my portfolio. And then I have an aha moment. Oh, now I can see the total portfolio value of all my ordinals across all my wallets in one place, right? But then you need to have other aha moments along the sort of the customer journey. The next one might be, oh, I got an alert when the floor price was going up on my ordinal, and I sold it and I flipped it for value. Every time that a user gets to the next aha moment, is you can see like a direct correlation between the retention and the user getting there. And so it's just all about optimizing that pathway and doing usability testing to make sure that people aren't confused on how to get there, and that you also prioritize the right features. Because if you prioritize the wrong features in your UI, then users aren't going to get to that aha moment. So I think, again, it comes down to user research really being core for any new type of product that you're developing.
Yeah, I mean, you really, from the Gamma perspective at least, touched it nicely with the artist example. I think, one of the things, and quite, pertinent here at our puzzle kind of week, but one of the things that we sort of struggle with, but, are really trying to put a lot of emphasis into and a lot of focus into from a product design perspective and user experience perspective is we sort of have these two relatively different users, different kind of segments and experiences that you're seeking. One which is often, at least in these early days, more of a degen kind of style collector. And then you have an artist who probably doesn't know anything about Bitcoin or, Web3 or more broadly. And so if you're trying to really make that experience for the artist super intuitive and, have that experience be as simple as possible, but then on the flip side, have the collector experience be a little bit more along these lines of, trader tools and things like that, you kind of have to find that right balance. And so, really, at least from our perspective, trying to hone in on like, what is that great middle ground or what are those contextual kind of points within the product where we can really tailor, the experience to one or the other. I think one thing that you can go too far in kind of abstracting things away, though, is especially on the artist side, because you want to make it so simple, you can go a little bit too far and sort of make these principled decisions that, we value, like kind of like the Bitcoin ethos of self-sovereignty and non-custody and all of these things. You don't want to go too far and make those decisions for the user when it's a moment to actually like educate them. So I think, anyway, this is a long-winded way of saying really trying to find that balance and also making sure that people have enough information, enough education so that they have, a great experience and they understand what's happening without going too far either.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Trevor, you touched on this a little bit already, but I'm curious if you could speak more on how UX UI plays into investment theses, when going, what are you looking for from MVP to scaling and so on?
Yeah, so I think, the thing that we tell all of our founders is like to limit scope as much as possible. Like you have to do less, but do everything that you do really, really well, right? And so, especially if you're out there raising money, like most VCs are not technical, right? And they may be less technical even than your average degen, right? And so they're going to judge a book by its cover, right? Because they're going to just get a pitch from you, and then they're going to kind of make maybe a quick call, and if they want to have another meeting or they want to invest. And so design is really, really important. Good UX is really, really important. More so than it is to your customers, actually. Like it's more important to impress a VC with like a polished UX. This is why we actually always look for teams that have a good front-end engineer, ideally somebody who is a co-founder level and not just like, pure design, but HTML, CSS, front end, animation, components, and things like this. But full stack, like you want generally T-shaped people on your team where they're a specialist in one thing, but a generalist in many others. And it's better to have one world-class feature in your product than 10 so-so features, right? You only get credit for the world-class features, and you have to have that polished UX, because most VCs, they probably just look at your site and they might not even sign up. There's going to be like, oh, this looks good. This looks like Uniswap or something like that. But if you don't have that, it's like generally like an automatic. Not for somebody like myself, because we're really, really early stage, but I can tell you the kind of VCs who are writing 100K, 200K, 500K checks, they're really going to judge you based on first impressions. So I think it's really good to have somebody who is like an OCD, somewhat autistic, pixel, like measures every pixel, understands a grid layout. Like if I, like the first thing I do whenever I giving like website feedback for a startup is I have a Chrome extension ruler tool, and I open their website and I just line up the ruler on the margins, and I scroll through the website and I see, does every single thing line up on this site or not? And if it doesn't, I say like, what the hell are you doing? Your front end person sucks. Like what, or let me talk to them and yell at them, kind of thing. Like, it's not something that people will consciously perceive, but subconsciously, right? Like you get a subconscious sense when you look at something, if it follows a grid pattern or not. The grid makes you feel a sense of order and a sense of sort of comfort that like, you may not, like the back end can honestly suck and like there can be bugs and stuff like that. But if there's like a really good front end, from a VC's perspective at least, right, who's going to do a superficial probably use of your product, that's going to be really important. So if you're raising money, if you're not raising money, I would say don't worry about it. If you're not raising money, just try to create something cool. People are going to trade on spreadsheets in Discord and do OTC. But as soon as you're approaching like these big funds with these partners who, are investing in like a brand and an idea of like who they think the founder team is going to be, that's when those things are really important. And so, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like super expensive to do, but you just got to find the right person who understands like the principles of design and can construct a front end where, there's a lot of like best practices in terms of like pixel ratios, font sizes, colors. Like this is something that a senior front end person should be very familiar with. And so I do think it's super important at the early stage when you start to raise. And what you want to do to make sure you get it right is just limit the scope as much as possible. Like limit the number of screens that you have, limit the number of features, and then you can knock everything out of the park.
I'm actually very surprised to hear that stress on the user interface, especially for pre-seed rounds. I typically think that the user interface is very much a detail that comes after the end. In fact, Oil closed our whole round without exposing any actual production interfaces or demo, because I think it's really on how you can articulate the UX benefits. The UI will continue to evolve. UI is a craft, it's styling, it's a taste-driven exercise. It's something that ultimately is going to align with the brand values. And I would actually be very skeptical of a company that stressed so much the brand and grid and UI before raising that first couple $100,000, because that would indicate a lack of the proper priorities where UX should very much, in my opinion, precede UI.
Well, I would say no website is better than a bad website.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we're unfortunately out of time, but Trevor, Nick, Cole, thank you so much for your wisdom. And it was a pleasure to talk UX UI with you.
Thank you, Caroline.